The ideas expressed in the Akron Roundtable Signature Series are those of the speakers and not of the Akron Roundtable, its partners, or sponsors.
And at this time, I would like to invite David Hunter, Akron Roundtable Emeritus Director, who will be introducing our moderator and speakers for today. Special thanks to David and Margaret Hunter for being today's program sponsor. Let's give them a round of applause. We greatly appreciate your support, and we'll have you now. Thank you.
Thanks to Curtis and to our audience, good afternoon and welcome to the Akron Roundtable. Today we are honored to have with us three special guests. First, an Olympic champion, multiple-time gold medalist, Akron native, and Hoban alum, Butch Reynolds. Next, a veteran educator and social entrepreneur in Akron, Ohio's public and chartered schools and universities, Ismail Al-Amin. And WAKR morning host Ray Horner, who will be serving as moderator today. These three will explore one of the most controversial legal battles in track and field history, the unfairness imposed upon Butch Reynolds, one of the greatest 400-meter athletes of all time. The trio will also address Reynolds' quest for redemption as captured in False Positive, ESPN's 30 for 30, a full-length film about Al-Amin's long friend, Olympic champion and world record holder Butch Reynolds. Ismail Al-Amin has laid out Reynolds' story from his earliest track glory to his career derailment and beyond. Butch Reynolds has seen it all and done it all. At age 12, he was able to run 400 meters in 48.1 seconds. He later attended The Ohio State University, where he won the 1987 NCAA 400-meter title. Between 1987 and 1995, Butch captured numerous world championship medals, including gold in the 1993 World Indoor Championships. Butch is also a two-time Olympic medalist, earning silver in the 400 and gold in the 4x400 meter relay in the 1988 Seoul Olympics. But perhaps Butch's most stunning track performance was in the 1993 World Championship 4x400 meter relay. In that foursome of Andrew Valman, Quincy Watts, Butch Reynolds, and Michael Johnson, they crossed the finish line in a world record time of 2 minutes, 54.29 seconds, a mark that has remained untouched for 30 years, for over 30 years. At this time, I would like to ask Butch, Ismail, and Ray to step up to the stage. If you'll come up, please. While we're getting ready, we have a short video for all of you to enjoy. A 400-meter final, often known as the race of the 20th century. And we have an outstanding broadcaster calling one of the greatest 400-meter finals of all time. Watch for Butch, who is in lane 3 and is wearing all white. So we can please run this now.
30,000 hold their breath. And off goes Butch Reynolds, but Egbaniki's gone off faster. Egbaniki in lane 5 has screamed down the back straight. And Andes of Cuba in the red shorts is closing, and Reynolds has got a battle on his hands because Egbaniki, the silver medalist in the World Championships, the Commonwealth record holder, the African record holder, has gone screaming around the bend. Danny Everett trying to close around the outside. And now comes Butch Reynolds, being pushed by Steve Lewis in blue. Reynolds is up to his shoulder. Reynolds is steamed past him. And Butch Reynolds is coming away. All 6'3" of him. He brings Steve Lewis with him, the 19-year-old. And Danny Everett will be third. And look at that! He's done it! The world record is his at sea level. And he's murdered it. He's taken it apart. And justice has been done at last. The fastest man in the world at altitude or sea level. 43.30, and that obliterates Lee Evans from the record book.
And now I'm going to ask Butch to tell us a little bit about that race while I go to sit down.
That was a dream come true, you guys. Seriously, you talking about hard work, dedication, and commitment. and that was all come together. Dedication, hard work, and commitment. And a coach made me the sign. He said, Butch, you can break a world record. And when I left Akron, Ohio, I didn't know what a world record was all about. I wasn't into track and field. I was into football and basketball. Then I got there, coach made me a sign. He said, Butch Reynolds, 43.86 seconds, world record. He said, you put this on your bedroom wall and you look at it every day. And for 4 years, I looked at that sign, and August 17th, 1988, 8:42 in the evening, that dream came true. So I used that message, and I used that type of experience to whatever I'm doing in life. If I believe it, if I got to change it, then I have a goal for it. And once I set that goal, it's like a spirit, a positive spirit. It's going to keep me focused to achieve that type of goal.
Butch Reynolds. We're going to talk a little, obviously, about false positive in a second. How many in this room have seen the false positive documentary? Well, I know I have. And when I watched the documentary by Ismail Al-Amin and, of course, Butch Reynolds and company, I got angry as I watched this thing go on that this false positive happened. But in talking to Butch on my show and in talking to Butch in person, anger was put aside. He didn't get angry. He used it for positive. And I think that goes in line with the title on how to build things and be patient with it. And maybe talk a little bit about that, Butch, and then we'll get into the background and everything leading up to it. But you didn't take that as an angry situation. You built on something.
Of course. I always tell the truth. And the truth is that whenever you get a blow like that, you're going to get a reaction. And the reaction was I wasn't happy. It was a bad time in my life. And I don't forget, because you have to handle it a certain way. When you get hit that way, it's two things you can look at it. You can look at it as negative and positive. And when I got hit that way, I lasted like a month, 30 days with a negative attitude. And I realized with that negative attitude, I wasn't an Olympian. I wasn't what I achieved. I wasn't a world record holder with that attitude. I was hurting myself in a negative mindset instead of using it as a positive, what I was used to, breaking world records, winning gold medals. So when I found the difference, it helped me get back on track, because, you know, when you're in front of the world and you did something you didn't do, and the whole world think you did it, it's a lonely space. It's a very lonely space at that time. And I look at the documentary, it's been 5 years now. And I'm thinking when me and Ismail Al-Amin did it, that the Nikes, the whole world is going to look at it. It was going to change my direction. It's going to change what happened to me, you know, when the documentary was aired. And what it did, it changed Butch Reynolds again. It didn't change so much of the world as it changed me. When I say it changed me, it kind of woke that sleeping giant up of doing what my grandfather told me to do 35 years ago, was to clear his name. It wasn't about $27 million. It wasn't about the Supreme Court. It was about clearing his name, that Reynolds name. And that took it from Butch. So the world record you saw was a lot of me and God, and now it's all God leading my way now. I know it for a fact. This is the only way I got from that false accusation in 1990 to this day is God led my way. He put good, positive people in my mix that believed enough in me. Not a lot, but he put enough in there. And enough when I came back to Akron, Ohio. Mayor Pisquellic is right here. He gave me an opportunity where a lot of people would not give me an opportunity because of the false accusation. And we got another Mayor, Malik, here. He's giving me an opportunity. So it's telling me, Butch, you better come back to Akron faster, you know?
From fastest man in the world in 1988, and then all of a sudden, 2 years later, the accusations come out pertaining to negative test, I should say positive test, pertaining to steroids and drugs and such. We're going to get into the story now in the friendship with Ismail Al-Amin. He is the movie producer, he's the director, and their friendship got this whole ball rolling on this. So, Ismail, let's talk about the beginning conversation, you and Butch, and then going forward with the project.
Yeah, well, you know, growing up here in Akron, Ohio, you know, and as a former athlete, you know, Butch was like that guy for us, you know, other people, you know, but Butch was like that person that we saw rise into those heights, you know, athletically. So I really got a chance to get to know Butch. I had just graduated from the University of Akron, getting my master's in. And someone approached me and was like, hey, man, Butch would like to meet you. You know, he's doing some mentoring work with young African-American boys on the east side of Akron, and he would like to meet you, see if you want to get involved with this organization. So that was really like I had met him before, but that was like my first time really getting a chance to meet him and talk to him and get to know him. So, you know, but I'm going to be honest with you, you know, I really didn't know if Butch was a clean athlete or not, you know, because sure. We're talking like 2000. I mean, so it was like, you know, a lot of the information wasn't available, you know, on the internet or things like that. So, so it was an opportunity for me to work with Butch, do some important work in the community, you know, but at the same time, build a relationship with him, ask him questions. You know, so over time, our relationship grew, and I just knew he had a very compelling story. You know, regardless if he was an innocent athlete or not, he had a hell of a story. You know what I'm saying? So I was like, man. So I was just trying to position myself, not so much knowing that I wanted to tell the story, but so much just being inquisitive on my own. You know what I'm saying? Because someone I looked up to as a young athlete and wanted to know better. But then having conversations with him and doing my research on the side, you know, I just felt like he was railroaded. You know, so at first I was trying to find someone to tell the story. You know, I was like, I need to reach it to get this story. But then after a while, I was like, shit, I can tell the story myself. You know, so, you know, I felt like I had the resources in place. You know, one of my former college roommates, his name is Bradford Young. And Bradford is probably the best cinematographer in Hollywood. You know, he's the first African-American cinematographer ever nominated for an Academy Award. We lived together in Washington, D.C. for 6 years. So I reached out to Bradford. And I was like, Brad, man, I got a story. And he was like, yeah, you know, he loved it. And he put me in contact with some people who put me in contact with some people who put me in contact with some people. And we knocked on ESPN's door a couple times, you know, but the second time we knocked on the door, we had a chance to really pitch it officially and properly. And they knew Butch's story because someone had tried to pitch it to them before, but I don't think that they had the infrastructure in place that made ESPN comfortable with greenlighting it, and they were very comfortable with the infrastructure I had in place. and the rest is history.
Yeah, for the documentary, for those of you who have not seen it, it really starts with competition in the athletic arena. Then it takes you into achievement, disappointment, and then it goes into the political arena. And then, of course, we talk about family with the Reynolds family and such. And Ismail, I love the way you chronicled through the film of developing that. It did not come across as an athlete who's just saying, I didn't do it. Mm-hmm. It came across with evidence that was well put together.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Butch's story is my story to a certain extent. It's like, you know, my people are from Alabama. You know, they were part of the black migration. They migrated to Akron, Ohio to work in the rubber factories. Both my grandfathers retired from the rubber factories here in Akron. So, you know, so just telling his story, you know, it was like I wanted to ground him first, you know, because, you know, False Positive is like a love letter to my city. It's a love letter to Akron for me. You know, it's a place that nurtured me, you know, in so many different ways. So it was an opportunity to really, you know, just ground Butch, you know, and community, you know, but at the same time, yes, you know, show the behind the scene research that I did, you know, talking to attorneys. You know, I spent a lot of time talking to attorneys, you know, sharing, getting information, examining legal documents. You know, it was like putting a jigsaw puzzle together almost. But once I was comfortable, I was like, man, you know, I knew it was going to validate him, because once you look at the evidence, you just saw, it was like, man, how could anyone do this to a person? You know, but at the same time, you know, when you're dealing with geopolitics and money, and you know, it's a perfect example of putting profit over people, and this is exactly what happened with Butch.
Butch, let's talk about the family side of this thing. So important to you as you went on in the quest to clear your name.
You know, it's funny because it was 25 years. What you gonna do now? I didn't want to play the victim role. I didn't want to play the woe was me, you know. So I'm praying to God. I said, God, what do you want me to do here? I have to do something, you know. And He brought this beautiful lady to me. She had 2 kids, and I said, well, God, this is what you want me to do? You want me to raise 2 kids like this? You know, I want my own, of course, you know, but. You know, my first one, I lost through birth. You know, he lived for 5 hours, and it was challenging. And I really didn't want any kids at that time, because it was just that heartfelt. And then I put it to God, and He brought me these 2, and I raised for the last 25 years. My daughter now, she's an attorney. She works for Jones Day. And my son's 11. He has his own business, a moving company. So I'm very impressed and happy that I spent my time doing that, because when I look at the people who motivated me, like a Nelson Mandela, he spent 27 years in jail, and 15 years was hard labor. And then like Hurricane Carter, he spent 19 years in jail for something that they did not do. And so even though I was free, I had to make sure that my head stayed free. I had to make sure that my mindset was free, because when you thinking like they took everything from me, you play that victim role, that woe was me, and that's how you get in trouble. So that's my message to a lot of people out there, is that when you're going through adversity, you know, think twice, because that first thought might not be the best move you make. So I had to catch myself, because people wouldn't say, you know, sorry, Butch, you was falsely accused, you lost everything, lost your house, your mom's house, you lost everything. They wouldn't say that. What they would say is that, oh, he was on drugs, or he robbed this place, or he did something he shouldn't have been doing. And that would have been my story. It was enough having the false accusation as my story. How can I change that? Well, ever since that day, I've been giving back. I've not been trying to get 27 million. I've been not trying to do this, do that. I've been giving back, working through my foundation, working through my training, putting people in school, putting people in college, giving them hope, giving them a sense of pride, giving them a sense of accomplishment. That's what I try to do. Just give everything I can give back. and wherever, and then God opens up my doors. He allows me to make a living this way, you know, because before, yes, any athlete, we're gonna make $1 million, we'll make $1 billion. That was an athlete's mindset, you know, and then all of a sudden now, I'm not spending athletes' money. I'm spending hard work money. Don't get me wrong, being an athlete is hard work. People used to say, I want to be more than an athlete, okay? Well, only when you're going to be more than an athlete, you take it from you. So when they took it from me, I was forced to be more than an athlete. But the bottom line is this, like a doctor don't say, I want to be more than a doctor. An attorney don't say, I want to be more than an attorney. Why do athletes always say, I want to be more than an athlete? That's who I am. That's who it represented. That's what changed people's lives, me being an athlete. So I could not run from that. Well, get me wrong, I wanted to. I wanted to change my name from Butch to whatever. You know, I didn't care. I just didn't want to be that person who Butch Reynolds was. But I had no choice but to accept that piece and accept who he was, non-athlete or an athlete. You know, that's who I am. I am an athlete. Everybody here represent me as Olympian, no matter what I do. I've been giving back to kids for the past 30 years, okay? That's not gonna make the TV or the radio or the news as much as the negativity would. You know, killing somebody right there, it's gonna make news, okay? And that shouldn't make news at all right? Helping people, giving back, trying to change this whole community to be a positive community, to be a statement in the world that we live in. That's the news, that's the story. That's what I'm a part of, going through this.
There was a whirlwind of scenarios involved in this story as well, and unfortunately for our guy Butch Reynolds, he got caught in the middle of a lot of this. A lot of it was political drama.
For sure.
And the other part was the kickback from some of the athletes. So not only are you fighting this stuff that you know you didn't do, you're caught in the middle of a political rhetoric going back and forth, and then you have other athletes that are there as well. How much did that weigh on you? And then when you're putting the project together, how was it to relive this that has been dormant for 30 plus years?
That's why you on the stage now. He asks great questions, don't he? Awesome questions. The first one is, it was hard watching my peers, my athletes, my friends stand against me this way. It was hard watching all of track and field, from the IOC down to the USA Track and Field, go against me. And I understand, because, you know, we have cops and robbers and whatever we do. When I say cops and robbers, we have people who are going to cheat. To this day, they're still going to try to cheat. But that's not who I am at the end of the day. And so for my peers to feel they didn't give me due process, it was upsetting. But I forgave them, because that's the only way I can move forward, is to forgive people. If I didn't forgive the whole world, I wouldn't have no friends. Because pretty much everybody had doubt. My director had doubt for a minute. That's why the documentary helps me, because it's not just me talking. I have the TV talking. I have my director talking that this is unjust. This is not right. You know, and I can't keep yelling, it's unjust or it's not right, because then I'm not taking care of my business. I'm not moving ahead. I'm not growing. It was hard to continue to grow on the pace that I was growing at. As a world record holder at 24 years old, you know, my life changed. I was making $100,000 a race, you know, at 25 years old. 100,000 to making zero. And you have to adjust to that. And I think that's why I lean on God so much. And I thank him so much. Because I broke the world record because of him. I fought the world because of him. And I'm standing here today giving back even more because of him.
And when all this is going on, and I mentioned the political rhetoric, because if you remember, you go back in time, that's during the Cold War. So he was caught in the middle of all that going on. And Butch, to his credit, pulled back verbally. But so often in today's society, when someone is faced with something, they're going to be verbal, they're going to be outspoken. And when you pull back, sometimes society looks at that as being guilty. So you had to fight that as well, of pulling back, believing in yourself when other people are saying other things.
Well, you know, people say use the system, work through the system. So that's what my focus was. And my system was to go to my federation to clear my name. Then it was the federal courts, then the U.S. Supreme Court. I won every court, I won every hearing using the system. And when I got to London, England, when the system is going to fail me with the world governing body of track and field, they're going to give me a 2 years no matter what. They want to give me 4 years. They want to give me another 4 years on top of the 2 I already spent. Okay? But I tell you, Peebo Bryson, he just passed away. I ran into Peebo Bryson in London, England. And that's when I got the word from the world governing body. They was going to keep the suspension together. They were going to keep it going. And I was going to lose my cool then. And to tell you how God works, you know, I ran into Peebo Bryson in London, England. I'm just walking down the street, and I look up, and I said, Peebo. He said, yeah, what's up, Butch? I'm like, whoa, you know. It was like, and he kind of calmed me down. He gave me a different perspective, and the perspective that I can sit here today with. Because what I was going through that press conference was, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. Because I had some very choice words and very choice feelings through that process at the time. And like anybody would, you know, you get to 27, your name, your livelihood taken from you, it can put you in a very fist fight mindset. Yep. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't go that direction. And when I talked to people, he calmed me down and made me look at a different perspective. And when I look at that, I look at Jesse Owens. 1936, he goes to Germany, okay, in the regime with Hitler. And he comes back from 1936. He's still a black man in the United States in 1936. And everybody who tells me talk about Jesse Owens talk about how humble he was. And I look at my situation, I'm like, man, it's hard to be humble, especially back then. It was even harder to be humble. So to be humble is definitely a testimony that when I watch somebody like Jesse Owens and see the humbleness, no matter where I go, no matter what country I'm in, when they see Jesse Owens, they know I'm part of Ohio State, they already connect. And everybody tell me how much of a humble man he is. And I just sit back and like amazed that he won 4 gold medals. He can't come to the front door to eat his dinner. He got to go through the back door to eat his dinner, and they still say how humble he is. So that gave me the energy to stay humble, to go through this process, because you can help more people being humble. Nobody wants you around if you got a negative attitude. Nobody wants you around if you're not a positive person. And being a coach, and I lived my life being a coach for 30 years, I had to be humble and I had to be motivating, no matter what the situation I was going through. So my training was always a therapeutic for me. When I trained my kids, when I trained my athletes, it was therapeutic. It was like a counseling session for me at that time. You know, I was able to motivate people, give back, and see their glow, see their happiness.
I want to bring Ismail back into the conversation. Putting this movie, this documentary together, and all the investigating that you had to do, all the research you had to do, and as this thing comes together, all of a sudden your cloudy perspective going into the project becomes ever so clear.
Yeah,
Talk about that learning process for you.
Well, you know, as a storyteller, you go in. It's almost like you don't go in with your mind made up of what the story is going to be. You know, some filmmakers were like, "Oh, well, I'm telling a story." I think really as a good filmmaker, you kind of let the process guide you. You know, and then as the process moves along, the story unfolds. You know, so. I did. I mean, it wasn't that I, you know, didn't believe in Butch. It was just the fact that we knew track and field was a dirty sport. You know, it's everybody. You know, it's like Butch's agent said in the film. Everybody's a dirty athlete except the one that you're talking to. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, so it wasn't that I didn't believe in him. It was just the fact that if I was going to make a very objective piece of art, I needed to go in with an open mind and be open to things unfolding the way they just need to unfold naturally, you know. So, but throughout the process, and doing the investigative work and studying the legal documents and getting the interviews, and I did so many interviews for this film, but I found it, but what was interesting to me was like, some of the more prominent track and field athletes that Butch competed with and against, they didn't want to be a part of the film. I'm not going to say any names. Carl Lewis, Michael Johnson, but we reached out to everybody, and but as the investigative process evolved and it started to present itself, it was like, man, this man got railroaded, and once I got to that point, I just wanted to lay out a compelling story that took people by the hand and helped them understand a lot of complex legal jargon, concepts, ideas. I just wanted to take them by the hand and just lay it out plain so everyone can understand it and so he can be redeemed.
The interview process, for those of you who have seen the film, is really compelling. But I also think from an artistic perspective, the way you zeroed in on Butch with the emotions of his face. Talk about that idea, because to me, that's really the star almost of the film.
Well, I honestly got that idea. There's a 2015 documentary called Salt of the Earth. And it was so interesting is like, I'm a documentary head. I watch all kind of docs. And I came across Salt of the Earth, and that full frame shot was just so beautiful to me. The way it was colored, the coloring process. And so once I knew I was going to tell Butch's story, I was like, man, I want to shoot this full frame shot the same way. I had already in my mind what I wanted it to look like, because Butch, he got the emerald green eyes. I was like, man, I want that just to be in people's face. But at the same time, I also felt like I wanted him to be kind of like sitting on a perch almost, because it's like, you're telling people that you're not guilty. We're gonna put you right in the world's living room. The only thing they're gonna see is your face, because the thing is, it's like, sometimes when you look at people's faces and they're not telling the truth, you can pick up on things. So I wanted to put him on the spot like that, so we used kind of like this. It was a camera rig. It was like. And it's like it's a camera, but it's like a mirror on two sides. So I'm looking in the mirror. In the mirror, I can see Butch's face. Butch is sitting on the other side. He's looking into a mirror, and he can see my face. So we're just looking at each other, and I'm just grilling him. Because I wanted to evoke that emotion, from him. We shot over at the. Over on Maple Street. It was the old fire department over on Maple Street. And we got to that part of the interview where I was asking him to talk about his mom. And we both broke down. It's like, and I was like, man, I was like, I had never saw Butch on that level, for him just to break down in tears like that. And when he broke down, I was like, oh, we got something. I knew that point when he broke down in tears, I was like, man, this is going to be so moving. It's just like, I just knew that we had made something enduring, and I was just so happy with the product.
Terrific. And again, for those of you who don't know the whole story, a faulty blood sample is what led to the false positive. I urge you to go watch the documentary False Positive. And I want to use that word positive with you, Butch. I'm going to go back to you. You've taken this and really made your life positive for not only you, your family, and that greater Akron area. So talk about what you're now doing and building in Akron.
Well, I'm always doing something. Right now, me and Ismail Al-Amin we working on a book together now. We're working on that. I did a book earlier, and it wasn't my book. It was more of my writer's book. And I told Ismail, I said, hey, I have to do another book. That didn't work for me because I don't know what was on page 3 or what was page 300. I wouldn't know. I said, but when we do a book, I'm going to know what's on page 3 and what's on page 300. So we've been starting the process on that. I have a script to do a movie. So I'm reading that over now, trying to see if I wanted them to do it or not. I'm still training every day. I train somebody every day. It keeps me, with the new NIL now going on. I got kids that want to train harder now. It makes them, if certain kids train harder, some kids don't want to train at all. That's what it is. Some kids get motivated and some kids is not motivated. So that's what I do now, and just try to stay positive and be the positive persons I can be. It's not hard being positive because I think my upbringings with the ethics, values, and morals was always positive. So with the upbringing, it made it easy.
My final question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience here in a second. We saw the video of you about 20 minutes ago. I believe that was in Zurich.
Right.
Greatest run of your life, or since we all saw the video, take us through that run and what was going through your mind as you started, and then that kick when he passed those people when it looked like they were standing still. So talk about that race.
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to, of course, God and all my coaches. Because I only had 2 coaches leading up to that time, and both of them had a lot of respect and love for Butch Reynolds. It starts with that piece. When I got to Zurich, Switzerland, my goal was just to win the race because that was the same year as the Olympic gold medal in 1988 in Seoul, Korea. It was a month before the Olympics, so I just wanted to win the race and get ready to win the gold medal in 1988. Well, God had other things happening because that 43.29 came out of nowhere. And when that came up and we ran that, of course, it changed everything. Like I said, I started making $100,000 a race after that day. My life changed. So, no, that race there, when Innocent Ebeniki got out so quick, he kind of changed the mindset. They say in our press conference he was a rabbit, but it's hard to have a rabbit in the 100 meters or the 200 or the 400. But when he got out the way he got out, he was considered a rabbit because when we came back to get him, he was no longer there. I think he finished 4th or 5th place. So when we came out to go get him, he set the tone for me. And I just knew that, I look at some video when I ran, and I looked at the Olympic trials in 1988, and I had 2 guys right behind my shoulder, Steve Lewis and Danny Everett. And I said, this time, they're not going to be there. So we're taught not to look back in life, not to look back when you run. Because when you look back, you're going to lose some ground moving forward no matter what. In life, you'll look back, you're going to lose ground. In running, look back, you're going to lose ground. So I was taught not to lose ground, stay focused. So when I was making that opening up, I didn't know what I was doing really. But I know I was the worst feeling I felt in my whole entire life. I never felt so much pain from my head to my toe. I blanked out for a good 30 seconds. I didn't know where I was at for 30 seconds. And then my brother let me know that you did it. I didn't know what he was talking about when he kept saying, you did it. I'm like, did what? I was just that removed. But it was a great day after that, and I did a press conference beforehand in Zurich, Switzerland. I was a young guy. Nobody really knew me, and nobody had any questions. There was about 50, 100 people, reporters, and the guy said, that's okay. When this guy come back, you guys going to all have questions. And soon enough, I came back. They all had questions. So now Europe was good. I love to travel. I love going to different places. It was a good time.
Good words to live by. Ladies and gentlemen, Butch Reynolds. And great story in putting together the documentary, Ismail Al-Amin.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, awesome. I'm Natalie Schulte. I'm a member of the Akron Roundtable Board. I'm a lawyer at Retzel and Andres. I also went to Hoban, and I also ran track, so kind of Butch Reynolds. So we have a lot of questions. I'm going to start with a funny one that came in a couple times. Butch, when was the last time you sprinted?
Whoa. The next person that gave me opportunity was Coach Trussell. He was the football coach at Theo State University for a few years. Anyway, he came to my office. We was a coaches meeting, not team, coaches meeting. He said, Coach Reynolds. He called me Coach Reynolds. He said, I think we should have you run the 400 meters. I go, I'm not running no 400 meters. And then he kept talking about it in the coaches meetings. And then the other coaches was coming in and say, Coach, I don't think you know, he's serious. He wants you to run that 400 and the team meeting, you know? And I said, if Coach gives me $27 million, I'll run that 400 meters, right? So I get to the track, because I had to put the thing together. I had to do like an extra work, and we had the whole team do a track meet. So I broke the team up, and we all did a track meet. So I'm running the track meet. In the middle of the track meet, I'm like, what's going on? Why he suspended the track meet? In the middle, he said, okay, Coach Reynolds, your turn. My eyes got this big. I'm like, whoa, he's making me do this. So I remember Brian Hartline, you know, he gave me his track shoes, and I ran the 400. I ran like a 51, you know, so it was still pretty good then, I guess, you know.
Very good.
Okay, let's see. Do you feel there has been true accountability or an apology from these international sports bodies?
That's an easy no. I think that's...
We had that conversation.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do now. We thought that would give them more inspiration to contact me and say, hey, Butch, let's make this wrong right. But they feel like if they contact me, like we talked about, they're going to owe me $27.3 million times 3. And
yeah, it just, I think it just opens, I mean, ultimately, as you see, if you watch the film, we definitely put Nike on the spot, you know, because Nike treated him so unfairly. So did World Athletics, well, the IAAF, which is now World Athletics, treated him so unfairly. But I think we come to understand it's like, if someone does provide a public apology, they're opening up themselves to some financial liability too. So we understand that, you know, but, you know, hopefully somebody down the road will do the right thing, hopefully.
So another one, what specific life lessons from your Akron roots kept you going when you could have easily walked away from track and field?
You know, I have to say, being the world record holder, being on top like that, I have to say just the respect, the love. You know, it's the love, the respect of Akron, and, you know, the Reynolds here. I mean, and, you know, going to Hoban and starting that whole process with Hoban, and what LeBron did with St. V. Just starting that whole process. I think, you know, my dad making the decision to send me there started that process.
That's awesome. What is one tip for physical preparation and one tip for mental preparation for any upcoming athletes or students in the room?
Mental, always speak positive affirmations about yourself. No matter what the situation is, speak positive affirmation. I don't like when people say, oh, I'm so dumb. No, you're not. You know, it's a little figure of speech, but watch the affirmation that you give yourself. And you think some kids can't talk positive about themselves. When I coach you, I encourage you to tell me that you're the best because you're training with the best, okay? So I coach them to speak more positive affirmations to yourself.
Awesome. For the documentary, were there any roadblocks in capturing this story that you were not able to overcome? I know you're dealing with lawyers. That's always fun.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think me and Ray, we were talking before this. some of the archival, sometimes when you see it, when you watch documentaries and you see old clips, news clips and photos and things like that, I don't think people understand the process behind it. It's like, we paid the International Olympic Committee $27 million a minute. I'm sorry, $27,000 a minute for that archival. So the biggest roadblock is we ran out of money. So thankful that we had good people over at ESPN, who believed in the product, who believed in the story so much that they cut us another check, to finish the film. And of course, you have to have good, like she said, you have to have good attorneys, who knows how to engage people and dialogue with people to get things cleared to use. But I would say probably the biggest obstacle was, just paying for the archival that we used.
Another question, what does a pitch to ESPN look like?
Oh, a pitch to ESPN looks like we put together a deck. A deck is it's a proposal. It talks about the film. It talks about the subject. It talks about the story. It talks about the team behind the story. So it's a written proposal. It's a digital proposal. So basically, it talks about how the aesthetic of the film is going to look. Talks about the runtime. It really just lays out everything about the film, and then you usually meet with. We had 3 meetings with ESPN. So the first meeting was with the development people. Then, if they like it, they pass you on to the next level of people, and then you kind of do the presentation again. And then if it gets past those gatekeepers, then you meet the execs. So our last meeting was with Brian Lockhart and Marsha Cook, who are like the big wigs over at ESPN Films, and so that was our last meeting, and that's when the check got cut, and we were at work 2 months later.
Butch, I know a lot of people look up to you. Is there a specific athlete that you particularly admire in your journey, and even if that's changed now?
When I was a little kid, I always looked up to Muhammad Ali and Jesse Owens, of course, and my uncle. He played professional football. So how you gonna not see that and feel like I can do that one day?
That's awesome. So there's a lot of things in your life so far that you've been known for. When it comes down to it, what do you want your legacy to be?
Whoa. Wow.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Somebody taking after you, Ray. I would say almost like Jesse Owens. He's a good guy. He fought for what he believed in. He's a good guy. He gave a lot back. I think I'd be happy with that.
That's pretty good. I think we all want that. Let's see. Any insight in the future of track and field for the United States?
I think 2028 here in the U.S. is going to be interesting. I think that track and field should do really well. We got some NCAA guys who's doing really, really well. And by 2 years, they're going to be a little bit more seasoned. So I think they're going to be knocking on the door for some young medals, for some young athletes.
That's awesome. Let's see. What has been your favorite race you have ever run? You can't count one that you've already won. Like, you can't count your big ones.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, that's easy. Zurich, Switzerland, the one you guys just watched,
Your most unknown or
race, or the race of life.
Yeah.
That's been the race right now for me, is the race of life. Just living life, understanding that the curves I had to take and adapt those curves and them keep moving me on that path, stay on that path of righteousness. So, yeah, that's been the biggest race right now, the race of life for me right now.
Okay. And then for both of you guys, I know you kind of touched on you're writing books. What are you most excited for that you're working on, and how does that kind of tie in with Akron and anything you want to tell us about Akron?
Yeah. Personally, what I like to do is to start my program here is the Gold Medal Mind Focus program, is to teach these youths how to have a positive mindset. Because parents can't be there all the time, coaches can't be there all the time, can nobody be there all the time. We got to give them some tools that they can use in goal, in team, in handling adversity, handling life transitions, handling a bad, attitude. Give them tools that they can use to stay positive with that process, because they got to have something to make them say, that's not right. That's not right. When we're not there. And it helps the movement. It helps the process. When somebody in that group says, that's not right, it only takes one person to say, that's not right.
Well, I would have to say, yeah, definitely the book. Yeah, I'm honored to, that Butch asked me to write the book, so I think it's going to be another compelling, more in-depth look at Butch's story, because when you're making a film, you only have an hour and 40 minutes to tell a life story. So much got left on the editing floor. So many issues and things that happened during Butch's ordeal got left out. So we'll be able to capture a lot of that stuff in detail. Also, I'm going to be directing a film coming up here for the 28 Olympics, which will be a NBC and Peacock production, another track and field film coming up here. So I'm happy about that.
Awesome. All right, one more question. What is your most unique pre-race ritual that you've never told anybody?
That I never told anybody. Oh, man. I'm glad it's G-rated, so I'm good with that piece. Running for 20-something years, 24 years is a long time. So I've been through different rituals that you go through. I used to take a little sip of honey, little honey packages. I used to do a little bit of honey packages, a little bit, just like a couple of sips on my tongue to give me that honey boost, that honey energy. That's a little different than I have never told anybody, really, about.
Well, there you go. Everyone knows the secrets now.
Yes,
Of being
a
an Olympian.
little honey.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We cannot thank you enough for being here today.
Thank you.
Let's have another round of applause for our featured speakers today. And a special thank you to Gardens Wealth Management. I'd like to invite Senior Vice President Michael Batu up to present our speakers here today with the Don Drum Commissioned Son and also the newly commissioned son in celebration of our 50th anniversary for all three of our speakers today. We thank you so much. We are so incredibly grateful for our time together today, Ismail, Roy, and also Butch. I think it's proof Akron matters, integrity and character still matters, and so we are greatly appreciative of your ability to share your story, the courage it takes, and how it's transitioned to the arts. And so one last round of applause for our speaker and moderator. As for next month, I will welcome food entrepreneurs Steve Marks and Harvey Nelson, who co-founded and co-led Main Street Gourmet. It'll take place on Thursday, August 20th, 2026. Their presentation is entitled, Do You Know the Muffin Men? The story behind Main Street Gourmet. It'll be a unique format where we'll have two podiums, and Harvey and Steve will share their story about how their business started almost 30 years ago and how it's become one of the largest providers in the region. That being said, we will also have a Bring It Home event on Tuesday, September 1st at the Well Community Development Corporation. In partnership with the Signature Series Luncheon, where we'll be featuring our very own immediate past president, Barry Dunaway, who will be moderating a conversation with local food entrepreneurs, including Erica Banks of Akron Food Works, and also Brett Wesley of Akron Honey. And lastly, we will have Amy Mucha, who so graciously offered her Daisy Cake Pops in celebration of our 50th anniversary. That being said, we would love for you to join us next week in listening to our radio broadcast on WKSU. We'll also have a broadcast on WVIZ next Sunday, and on on July 23rd, Western Reserve Fusion Channel, we will be streaming. For information about upcoming speakers and also tickets and subscriptions, please visit akronroundtable.org. Appreciate you all coming today, and thank you for sharing with us. Have a great afternoon.
This has been a production of Akron Roundtable, PBS Western Reserve, the University of Akron, and IdeaStream Public Media.